Hey guys, today I want to show you some of the plants that do really well in this arid desert climate that has been well over 100 degrees for over, I think, between 2 or 3 months now. Every single day that it has been hitting triple digits, and for the past week it's been about 112, even 115 degrees here. It's been really hot, and these plants really have been doing so well, flourishing, thriving in this extreme heat. So the first plant I want to show you guys is the Sunchoke. Sunchoke is doing amazingly well here, as you can see. This one here is actually, well, when it was first planted out, it was in full sun, but then there's more branches, like kind of some new growth on the tree. So it is getting some light shade on one side, and then it's full sun on this side, so it's actually getting a little bit more like a side full sun here, and it's like super lush here. This is one plant that you're seeing right here, just one plant. Now this entire garden has a really big tree that actually shades a lot of the plants, so I'll be showing you guys, you know, and I'll be telling you that if this plant was growing in some shade, light shade, or full sun. So there's going to be a variety of plants, and as long as you pick the right plants, it's going to work a lot better for you instead of having to struggle through and doing all these maintenance, right? So you just have to prep it once, such as having a shade cloth for some of the plants, and some plants that may not even need a shade cloth, then you don't need to put it on because that's just more work for you, and the plants would grow slower if you have the shade cloth on. So like I said, this Sunchoke here is growing, getting some sides, direct sun, not direct, well, some sun on the side, and then the top does have the tree shading it, and it's growing amazingly well. It's actually even putting out some buds way at the top up there. This thing is probably I think it's pushing 6 feet here. It's on a raised bed, so without counting the raised bed, just on the actual plant height, it's like 6 feet or so, and the buds are coming, and these are really amazing, you know, healing kind of plants. Produces really well. You actually harvest the tubers to eat when the plant die out, when the cold starts to hit. I do have an episode on harvesting the Sunchokes and the Yacons, so I'll leave a link down below the video or on the card up top for you to check out. In the future, I cannot wait to be harvesting the different varieties of Sunchokes, and that will be in a future episode. But for now, let's move on to this full sun fruit doing really well in the full sun, which is right over here. Right over here we got the Jujube Tree. Jujube is super hardy. It actually does really well here, even in the cold. They are deciduous trees, so the leaves will fall off in the winter, and then they will come back in the spring. And you can see that it has been putting out so many fruits on this. This thing is pushing, oh, it's probably like about 10 feet tall tree, and there's actually some jujubes ready that's way up top there. It's got these beautiful brown spots on it, so I bet it's really crunchy and sweet, especially with all the sun that's been, you know, getting these fruits to really sweeten up. So I guess I'll have to put up a ladder and pick these fruits. Anyway, so jujube, I do have a couple of episodes talking about jujubes and, you know, the things to be concerned about growing them, and at the same time, because their roots are invasive, this makes them really hardy to grow. So this one is in a large container growing, and it's actually fruiting. And like I said, this one is in full sun, so you got to pick the right fruit trees and the right vegetables to grow for your climate. That way you won't struggle. So sometimes it's not even about having a green thumb or a brown or black thumb. It's about picking the right plants. Your thumb would just become greener because, you know, it's just, you have such an easier time. So remember to pick the right plants. This is an Etomoya. It's a tropical fruit tree similar to a cherimoya. So for those of you who have had it, it is a very sweet custard-like kind of a fruit, really tasty. Now this tree was overwintered inside the house, but I have seen a Vegas home garden that grows it in the ground, so it survives winter and it also fruits for them. This tree here is a grafted tree. It has just been transplanted in about mid-summer. The entire year, like earlier this year, it was outside under the tree, so I was getting some nice filtered sun even though it was growing in, you know, this desert heat this entire year so far. But then it got moved to full sun. Right now it's just exposed to full sun, and all the leaves were had gotten burned at the beginning when it was transplanted in this spot. So for those of you who are new gardeners, I just want to let you know that sometimes some plants look like they're dying, but they may not. It's just that they're being exposed to a more extreme weather all of a sudden and they go into shock. So that's something you have to do called hardening off your plants, which means whenever you're going to, say you start them off as younger plants or plants that's been growing in the shade for a long time, you want to move them to more sun exposure, then you have to do it gradually so you don't freak the plant out, you don't shock them by, each day move them a little closer and have a little more sun a little longer, bring it back to the shade. Just kind of, baby them and just introduce them slowly out there. But in this case, it was not, there was no hardening done here. The plant went straight, this tree went straight from filtered light under this tall tree to this full sun area. So it kind of went into shock. It didn't totally go into shock because all the branches stayed really healthy, but the leaves, the tips of the leaves and some leaves got burned and it fell off. So it looked like it was dying. But if you look closely, these nodes here, they're actually putting out new growth. And so these new leaves has been adjusted to this heat, so it's not getting burned. And as long as you give all your plants sufficient water, of course, then the plants that you choose will do really well. So that's one of the biggest things is, water. The plants do thrive with sun and water. So if you pick the right plants that do well in the heat, you still have to give them the sufficient amount of water for them to thrive. And this is a perfect example of that, I think. It's getting good water, it's getting good nutrients, nice compost and worm castings and these beneficial microbes in the soil and water, of course, that's helping this plant thrive and getting used to more sun, adjusting, and now it's actually putting some flower buds. Let's see. Oh, well, I did see I saw a couple of flower buds earlier in the week. I think it might have fell off for some reason, but this is still a pretty young tree, and it has just gone through the shock of transplanting, like I said, and exposing to full sun. But nevertheless, this is a really healthy looking tree, and I think fruits in the future is quite promising. Let's move on to the next crop. Right next to the Etomoya tree is a bird fountain. Now this has been repurposed to grow more of the plants that are more shallow, has more shallow root systems, such as these microgreens, and this is the gold moss. It's a really beautiful trailing ground cover. So I just love how it would just drape over here, just down the fountain. It's just so beautiful. And it does really well in this full sun area as well, as long as, again, you give it sufficient amount of water. So there is an irrigation system that's, feeding all these plants here. It has just all those random seeds are just sprouting in this full sun and really moist soil. Some parts of this, it's actually really wet too, but these plants actually don't even mind it. There's even a Malabar spinach that came from the mother plant that was growing and just behind this fountain last year. So the seed has dropped and it germinated about 4 inches tall now, doing a really just amazingly well in this little fountain. Other than that, this fountain, I really wanted to focus on telling you about these gold moss plants. These are really succulent, edible plants that are really easy to propagate. You just basically lay them down and show you guys. So You know, you just lay them down, and every single place where the leaf grows out of are nodes that would send roots down once they touch soil. So you can actually get these as cuttings, which I do have them available on my website if you're interested. This plant does not handle the cold well, so you would have to protect them over winter, but they grow amazingly fast once after the frost and when the season warms up. It's really crispy, kind of like almost like a lettuce replacement. I really love these in sandwiches or throw them in salads because it has like nice little texture in there, and it's just really succulent and crispy. Yeah, so I really love them. If you have some living mulch, growing, then it would just keep growing even more food for you in a very low level to cover up your soil to protect from the sun, especially in this Vegas kind of a heat. It's really important to protect your soil life. And what's even better than putting, dried mulch? I mean, I would love dried mulch too, don't get me wrong, but living mulch is another excellent addition to your garden, especially for growing in small space, or if you're trying to pack as much food into your garden as possible. You're growing food, like plants in different heights, different levels, so that you can grow abundance of food in your garden. Another plant that does really well here is the purslane. Now this one is related to the purslane, but also is edible. It does not have big leaves like purslane, but it's a hint of sour. It's so good, especially in this heat. Actually, it tastes even better than the one in mine in California because of the heat. It gives a little more tang, like more flavor to the leaves. But purslane is high in omega-3, really good for your joints, your skin, your heart. We find omega-3 in supplement form or like salmon, and but certain plants do have that. Have omega-3 as well, and the purslane has that. And what's really great about these ones is that they actually put out really beautiful flowers too, and the entire plant is edible. Beautiful large flowers that I don't have. There's no flowers in this one yet because I just planted this one down, but I'll show you guys a picture of the flowers. They're really beautiful. So I would personally love growing both kinds. The purslane that you consider as weed, because they just kind of pop up in your garden every time it starts warming up through the during that time of the year. But those ones send out like yellow little flowers, and this one is more like an ornamental type, but it's also edible, and they do really well just by propagating through cuttings, just like the gold moss. So I really love that as ground cover. They don't like this, they don't like the cold, but they do love the sun, the full sun, the really hot sun, or basically the warm time of the year, and you just grow them out in the sun. Alright, let's move on to the next plant. This is a pepper flower. It's a type of chili pepper. So chilies or peppers do really well in the extreme heat climate. They love the full sun. So you can see that this bed is in full sun, and some other peppers here growing as well, and they're all doing really well. Like peppers do a lot better here than tomatoes. Eggplants do better than tomatoes here. If you are going to be growing tomatoes, grow the smaller varieties like the cherry tomatoes. But chilies, it's pretty much a guarantee. As long as you give it enough water, chilies would grow really well in the heat. As you can see, the first set of fruits were finished, so there's a bunch of new growth and new flowers, these buds, that's going to put out another set of fruits here. And if you want to do sun-dried peppers, you can just leave them on a tree and pick them when they're dried. Here are the fish peppers. Oh my god, I love the variegated leaves. And this one is part of the plant is in part sun and part of it is in full sun. But I'm really surprised how the white parts of the leaves did not get burned because of this heat. And because white actually is something that, how do you put it? Not like a false gene, but basically there's no chlorophyll. So in another way, in other words, there's no chlorophyll, there's no protection, so the leaves actually should be more sensitive, but it's not. So that's really cool. And look at the flowers here. They just finished their first set of peppers out here, and so these are the new flowers. A lot of people think of growing bell peppers when they're thinking of sweet peppers, but there's actually a lot of different varieties of peppers out there. So I highly encourage you to do some research and seek out the peppers, you know, the different varieties out there, because they actually grow a lot easier, such as banana peppers grow really well out in this this Vegas arid climate, this desert area. And it also does very well for me too in California. So banana peppers is, you know, there's hot banana peppers and there's also sweet banana peppers. So if you want to look for sweet peppers, grow them more like the chili pepper form rather than the bell shape. You get a lot more yield from those sort of crops. And this one here, it's actually the chili flora is a very mild heat, mainly a little more fruity and more consider a sweet pepper. And then there's a hot pepper there. I believe it's the black cobra right over here next to it. And that one is doing amazingly well here as well. It is a hot pepper. So peppers is definitely on the list if you live somewhere that gets quite a bit of heat, and if you have a lot of full sun. So that's the key to growing peppers. You've got to give them full sun. Otherwise, I have grown peppers in part shade, and they'll produce, but they didn't have taste. Like the sweet ones were not sweet at all. It just tasted like nothing. But they do produce. That's the thing. So just keep that in mind. This is a sweet potato bed. Now this raised bed is actually under the tree, but the sweet potatoes actually planted out that way, but because there's an AC unit out that way, it's a bit too loud for me to film there. That's why I'm in this more shaded spot. But the sweet potatoes actually were planted in the more sun area. So part of the sweet potato plant is in the sun and then some are in the shade, but they're growing amazingly well. Look how green they are. And they're just so beautiful. Cannot wait to harvest these. These are, they're the Okinawa purple sweet potatoes. So what's really great about potatoes are sweet potatoes, which I do have some episodes, or actually an entire playlist of sweet potatoes for you to check out. I'll link below, or and the card up top for you to, if you want to grow some sweet potatoes, because it's a really delicious crop. You can eat the leaves. You can, I eat a little bit raw, but mainly cooked. Do stir fries, soups, a little bit in my juice or smoothies. And then when it's time to harvest the tubers, you can also, harvest the tubers to eat when the plant dies out. And then right in front of me here, I'll go grab the camera and show you guys the fig trees that are doing really well here too. Here are some beautiful fig trees. They're all still pretty young. They're about just 5 to 6 feet tall. Put out fruits so fast. There are actually quite a bit of fruits on this tree here, and it's just about 6 feet tall, or 5.5 feet. So figs grow really fast. Sometimes they might go dormant in the winter, but they'll put out some new growths, every spring. And it's one of those really hardy fruit trees that fruit really fast. So if you're looking for a fruit tree that, grows, put out fruits fairly quickly instead of years down the road, look into investing for fig trees, because they also propagate really well. They're hardy. There are just so many varieties out there that I encourage you to do your research to find the right variety for you. Some do a lot better in heat than others, and they all kind of vary in taste slightly and colors and all that too, but figs are great. I mean, the leaves, you can dry them as tea. You can have them dehydrated. You can eat them basically like chewy candy, thinly sliced into your salads, or eat them whole, eat them fresh, have them in smoothies, add more sweetness and texture in it really binds things like raw recipes together really well. Now this fig tree that I'm talking about is under the tree, but I know and I have seen people grow figs around here in full sun. So there's another fig tree to the side there that's actually getting a lot more sun than the one I'm standing next to. They're just one of those really hardy ones like I keep talking about. Let's move on to the other raised bed that's actually getting a lot of sun. Before I show you the other plant, I want to talk about the Sunchokes again. Here's another Sunchoke that's doing really well, and it's getting a lot more sun exposure than the other one that I showed you at the beginning. But yeah, like I mentioned before, if you've never planted, if it's like a new crop that you're planting out, I highly encourage that you get multiple plants so that you can put them out in different locations in your garden, so you know where they actually like best, so that you can plant in that spot in the future. But it looks like, yeah, I mean, this one's getting more sun, but I guess we'll have to see at harvest time to see, which plants put out the most tubers. After all, these are grown for the tubers. So right next to that, got these hibiscus roselle, also known as roselle, planted. These are the ones that put out these flower buds, and then after they flower, they actually start kind of like getting really like plump up, and that's the thing you eat. It has like this nice tart flavor, beautiful red pigment, really good in teas or iced teas. I'm sure you guys have had hibiscus tea. So the leaves of these plants are edible. Has a nice sour taste. I've been really loving cutting these and adding these hibiscus leaves in my salsas. Really good. Just, chop them up and add them to the salsa. So good. I love to be able to, think of more ways how you can incorporate leafy greens into your diet. If it's like salsa, I dip so much of that stuff, and I love tomatoes, so I can blend in different types of greens, especially the greens that has a more mild taste. I can throw them in salsas too. And this one is tart, which really goes well with the tomatoes. So I really love these in sandwiches and salsas and salads, smoothies. Yeah, don't overpick the leaves, because you do need them for energy so that you can get them to produce the flowers. This one loves full sun, just like okra. These two plants do amazingly well in full sun. It's like the hotter and the more sun you give it, the better they produce, the more abundance they will produce. This is the genera procumbens bed, also known as longevity spinach. This plant absolutely loves this place. It's got some filtered light, also some direct sunlight in certain spots here, but mainly it is growing in filtered light, and of course with sufficient amount of water. And because it's actually got protection under the tree, this plant stays alive and does actually continue to stay really green in the winter, so it doesn't even stress out in the winter. And just because it's really protected here, it does get a light freeze here and there throughout the winter, but because it's in a more protected space, also it's growing against like the wall here. It's a wooden fence, but it still can retain a little bit of warmth at night to keep the plant warm. And this is the plant that I have multiple videos in the past to show you how to grow it and how to eat it and how to take care of it, because of the medicinal benefits of this plant. So good for your blood sugar, your blood pressure, cholesterol. It's a little bit gelatinous taste, like the texture, but other than that, it's really mild, like kind of like lettuce, doesn't really have much of a flavor, so it's so neutral that I can add it to anything. And actually I'm about to pick some of these because we're gonna make a smoothie here. I'm just gonna, because like I said, it doesn't have much of a taste, but the texture of it, it's like soluble fiber, so it's really great in a smoothie. It doesn't have that texture after you blend it like a like kale or collards or something. So I really love these with like coconut water, or even throw in some berries or blueberries, things like that, and they're just so tasty. The more you pick them, the more they grow, just because you're encouraging more side growth, and so the plant would grow fuller the more you harvest, the more you eat them. And then right next to this bed, it's the stingy nettle bed, which gets a lot more sun. But it's growing here. Well, it's actually getting a lot of sun, but at the same time it's getting some filtered light all throughout, because this portion here is growing directly under the tree. This is the stingy nettle bed. You can either throw these in smoothies or process them somehow with juicing, but just be really careful because they are really they really sting, just like the name. I do have an episode on showing you how to harvest them and to turn them into tea, because they're really great as tea. They're really tasty. They're also really good in, like, you know, stir fries, like if you guys eat eggs, like in scrambled eggs. You can make a soup with it. It makes the fresh tea, like the leaves make the soup really green. I mean, the chlorophyll in this is just insane. So if you want to keep, you know, dry them out like in this bed, there's so much more than you can eat. You definitely can dry them and make tea so that you can have it in the winter as well. They're so nutritious, so good for you, good for, you know, allergy season. I would say to start before your allergy season. Start harvesting them, start eating them, start taking the supplements or the tea a couple months before, you know, allergy season or the pollen hits. Another thing is I found out that these are actually really good for protecting your prostate. So another really wonderful wild food to eat. While I'm here, let's just pick a little bit for the smoothies so that, you know, they're just so nutritious. So let's just have a few in the smoothies. I like to just give it a bit of a mist to keep them a bit hydrated while I'm harvesting. That way they won't wilt. Over here in this raised bed, you can see that. These are some microgreens. Now these microgreens were from Locosano Greens. He grows microgreens to provide to the community here in Vegas. So if you guys are in Vegas looking for microgreens, be sure to go hit him up. I'll leave a link to his Instagram and the website just below this video for you. You can give him a follow. He grows these really amazing microgreens and provides, you know, himself with an organic food garden here basically. So I'm just going to snip some of these up, because what happens is that he grows them in coconut coir, and so the seeds that did not get germinated would eventually germinate. So after, you know, harvesting them, you basically just, you know, throw the soil down the coconut coir to fill up or to top off the raised beds. So the seeds that did not get germinated in the grow room would get germinated here. So I'm just going to snip some of these off and we're going to add it to the smoothie. Basically giving them a haircut, just like how you guys were to thin out your greens when you direct seed them in the soil. I even get to eat these or drink these in a juice form, and they're amazing. Alright, got myself some microgreens. Let's go harvest the vegetable that I want to share with you guys that's growing super well here. In fact, this vegetable, it really loves the heat. It just basically sow, you know, itself and germinate out here when the weather is warm. This is the Egyptian spinach. This thing, you plant it once, it is an annual because it dies off in the winter. But you know what? It just produces so much seed pods that once the ground gets warm again, they will germinate. So in the early August, this is actually, you know, the hottest time in Vegas, and these Egyptian spinach would start, you know, germinating. So I'm just gonna pluck these, and what's amazing about these is that you treat them kind of like basil. Not necessarily the way you propagate basil, but, you know, they kind of really like growing fuller if you would just encourage them just by plucking the stems on the top so that you can get side shoots coming to get fuller plants. And this is such a beautiful, mild tasting but very gelatinous. So those of you who don't like the taste of like okra, that sliminess, you may not really like it, but you know what you can do that you can get away with eating this is by making smoothies. This is like a water soluble fiber. So if you don't like the gelatinous taste of things, just throw them in the smoothies. That's what I'm doing right now with these, is that I pluck these up, and because they're, you know, water soluble, they're not gonna be fibrous. They're gonna go down like juice, super smooth and as a smoothie form. And just really, it's just really tender. I love this. I also add this to salsas. This is the red variety. I'm gonna go out and pick a little bit of the green variety. Here's this green one. Just gonna snip. And this one is so beautiful. Look at that. Thank you, plant. Oh my gosh, you're so gorgeous. Okay, let's wrap it up. You see all these Malabar spinaches are sprouting all over the place. Malabar spinach is also doing really well here. You can see how green, and this is actually under the sun, but I have seen them growing in full sun out here, doing really amazing. This is one of those really gelatinous kind of a tasting too, and a little bit sour. So again, you know, if you're not a fan of that, you can throw them in the smoothies, which I will be doing because it makes the smoothie really smooth tasting. Other than that, you can, some of the leaves that are so big, you can use it as a wrap. Check out this harvest, guys. I'm super excited about my smoothie I'm gonna make with some frozen pineapples and coconut water with all these greens that I just harvest out here. Oh, it's gonna be so good in this hot weather. So thank you all so much for joining me on this somewhat of a garden tour, and to see what sort of plants will survive in this extreme weather. Not just surviving, but thriving. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more videos, and follow me on social media like Facebook or Instagram, where I do instant updates of my life that you don't get to see on this channel. And if you would like to support my work, I really would appreciate that. Please go check out my website at wendylen.com. I'll leave everything that I just mentioned just below this video. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Be sure to stay hydrated, happy gardening, and stay safe, guys. Bye.